Live from Lagos, this is Lunchtime Politics, reaching you live from our global headquarters in the nation's commercial nerve center. I'm Jeffrey Uzama. Here are the stories we're tracking at the moment. Supreme Court reserved judgment in the Kogi governorship election appeal filed by the SDP candidate Murtala Njaka against Governor Usman Ododo of the APC. As also the Supreme Court here appeals preferred against Doye Diri of Bayelsa State by the governorship candidate of the APC, Mr. Timipre Silva, in that state. And People's Democratic Party and the All Progressives Congress trade words over outcome of Saturday's local government election in Bauchi State, where the PDP won all 20 local government chairmanship seats after the exercise. And again, supply chain disruption sees queues resurface across major cities in Nigeria. Some players attribute discrepancy in price to supply distortions. Welcome again to the program. A good place to start is to let you in on the fact that hearing is underway at the Supreme Court, where a 5-member appeal of the Supreme Court has reserved judgment in the Kogi governorship election appeal filed by Murtala Njaka of the SDP against Governor Usman Ododo. The Apex Court is hearing the electoral outcome of disputes which followed the outconduct of the governorship elections in Bayelsa and Kogi states in 2023. At the center of the disputes are Governor Doye Diri of Bayelsa State and Governor Usman Ododo of Kogi State, who were declared winners of the poll by the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, last year. A former Minister of Petroleum Resources, Mr. Timipre Silva of the All Progressives Congress, and Murtala Njaka of the SDP, were challenging the declaration made by INEC on the outcome of the election. However, the separate governorship election petition tribunals and the Court of Appeal, both of which sat in Abuja in their respective findings, affirmed the declaration of the electoral body on various grounds. In the meantime, President Bola Tinubu will be heading to France later today. His special advisor on media and publicity, Ajirin Galali, disclosed this in a statement, adding that President Tinubu will return to the country after a stay in the European country or nation. The very short statement by the president's spokesman was not expressed on the reason for the trip, just days after his return from a 3-day working visit to Equatorial Guinea, simply stating it's a brief work stay. And now, just before we continue with the politics, the queues are back, especially in Lagos and Abuja, causing gridlock in parts of the metropolis as vehicles snake down the roads and some overlapping into parts of the highway. The current scarcity is said to be attributed to supply issues faced by the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, a similar scenario that happened in previous round of scarcity. According to the national president of the Petroleum Product Retail Outlet Owners Association of Nigeria, Mr. Billy Gilihari, who was guest on our program, The Morning Brief, says the supply challenge is responsible for the differences in prices at retail outlets.
The difficulty is hinged on the supply challenges emanating from ship-to-ship transfer. NNPC is working hard even to give products to us as retail outlet owners or as marketers. And all we are waiting for is just these supplies that they have started working with to arrive in our depots on all the coastal areas in Lagos, Delta, Rivers, Calabar, so that we can be able to lift this product and distribute same in all our retail outlets. NNPC has not changed prices. As of today, we still buy at the template which they have provided. The only challenge we have with buying directly from the NNPC is that this supply challenge is affecting us. If it were not so, almost all the retail outlets will sell just within a bracket of what has been approved. And also, why you can see some price differences within a given area is that maybe the 2 filling stations did not get their products sourced directly from NNPC. They may have sourced it from second level, third tier levels, And at those points, prices will change because also the logistics to move them from one location to the other will also change.
Let's move on to some political stories where the aftermath of the Bauchi State local government elections, where the People's Democratic Party won all the governorship, chairmanship seat, I should say, has now seen the two leading parties in the state giving variant version of events that played out at the polls. The All Progressives Congress in the state is calling for the cancellation of the results and immediate resignation of the chairman of the Bauchi State Independent Electoral Commission, Ahmed Makama, over irregularities.
20 newly local government chairmen in Bauchi State, all PDP, received their certificates of return following their declaration as winners of the local government election by the state's Independent Electoral Commission.
We blame the Bauchi State Independent Electoral Commission, chaired by Alhaji Ahmed Makama, for failing to ensure the right thing is done at the right time and for failing to resist the PDP government in its quest for political dominance against the popular will of the people of Bauchi State. We reaffirm our stance that the purported local government elections is unacceptable, and we shall explore all legal means to reclaim our mandate and ensure that the right thing is done always.
Well, in his response, the People's Democratic Party has defended the election, stating that it was free and fair, as the governor, Bala Mohammed, charges the new council chairman to deliver the dividends of democracy.
Let me remind the local government chairman that you see their election to this position of responsibility as a challenge and as an opportunity to prove their worth as competent and reliable managers of men and resources. The electorate will be looking up to you to cater for their well-being through the provision of infrastructural facilities and social amenities. With the granting of autonomy to local government, the bar of performance for elected officials has been raised.
All right, so let's get to the very conversation for the day. I'm being joined in the program by Executive Director of Yaga Africa, Mr. Samson Itodo. He joins us via Zoom. Mr. Itodo, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon.
All right, Mr. Samson, before we go into the issues of election and election management and what we're seeing play out in the immediate term in Bayelsa and what will be playing out in Edo and Ondo, let's backtrack a bit to something you talked about when that counter-subversion bill by the Speaker of the House of Representatives came out, and there was so much pushback, and we're grateful that he has eventually done the right thing to withdraw that particular bill. But what do you see? Is it a situation where we may have missed an opportunity, where we have thrown the baby and the bathwater, or it was plain provocative?
I don't think it was a missed opportunity. I think it was a victory for democracy, because that proposed bill was draconian with obnoxious provisions that will undermine our Constitution, will undermine the rights of citizens, and also vest overbearing powers on the Attorney General of the Federation. And if that bill had sailed through, it would really undermine democracy. Yes, the objective is to strengthen Nigeria's response to terrorism, but those provisions do not in any way, safeguard or guarantees that. So it is great that the Speaker heard the voices of citizens who spoke against the bill. So I don't think it's actually a lost opportunity, because the Terrorism Act, the Public Order Act, there are extant legislations that already make provisions for some of the issues contained in the bill. So it's not a missed opportunity. Instead, it's a victory for democracy that citizens spoke and rejected a proposed legislation that was going to take away their rights.
All right, just before we let off that issue and get to issues of electoral management, it raised a bit of concern as to the thought process of the legislature and the legislators themselves. Are you worried about their thinking when it comes to the pulse of the polity, especially at this moment?
Absolutely. And that's why, at civil society and also citizens, we're very worried about, the proposing the legislation, because that legislation was coming at a time when the End Bad Governance protest, came to an end or was suspended. And then it came against the background of this very, tough, brazen, a response of the government to citizens' demands as well as the protest. You know that in the last 10 years, we've seen an attempt to use the legislature to curtail on the rights of citizens. So across every assembly, you've either seen anti-social media bills or you've seen, bills aimed at regulating civil society organizations, NGOs, and religious institutions. We've also seen proposed legislations that seek to limit the exercise of the citizens' right to protest, public assembly, or freedom of expression. And these are signs of democratic backsliding. And so, to a very large extent, the legislature shouldn't yield itself, to forces that seek to threaten and undermine democracy. And so it's quite worrisome, but I'm glad that, the speaker withdrew that bill. And it also suggests, that the National Assembly needs to listen more to Nigerians and not propose legislations at a time when the country, is still struggling with holding the tenets of democracy as well as constitutionalism.
All right, let's now go to elections. Let's begin with the issue, the election that played out in Bauchi. You've seen a lot of these elections at all levels, and it's almost a repeat and rinse situation. You can almost predict the outcome of elections when it's conducted by State Independent Electoral Commission. We've seen it happen again in Bauchi, where the incumbent or the ruling party has won the entire, I think, the 20 local government area. And we can go back to the recent ones and almost predict what will happen in the coming ones. When assertions, just like I expressed now, hit you or come to you, are you worried? And how can we backtrack or retrace our steps so that there should be some semblance of what is called democracy in the electoral process at the subnational level?
Absolutely. I was just smiling because Nigerians need to know that it appears there is a gentleman agreement amongst governors and political actors. And that is, if Party X is the governing party in a particular state, and then in another state you have Party Y, as the leading party in that state, even though it's an opposition at the national level, it appears there is some agreement between the governors that, hey, leave me to control my territory and I'll leave you to control your own territory. So even if you conduct shambolic elections and you sweep all the seats as Party X, when Party Y in another state, please ensure that your party does not raise any opposition because, my state wants to control all the entire local government structure. The second is, at least even in Bauchi, you had YPP and AAC, secure councillorship seats. And I will come to that because there's also another level of agreement which we suspect, that the political parties, the provisions of the Constitution, provides the criteria for deregistering political parties, and that is parties must secure at least a councillorship seat. So it does appear that one of the reasons why you're probably seeing in some states where parties are beginning to win maybe one councillorship or the other is the product of what we suspect to be an agreement or an arrangement between political actors that they yield, at least one councillorship seat to one of those parties, so the parties don't stand a risk of deregistration. And these are some, sort of new things that we're beginning to learn in this entire process. But yes, in Bauchi, you had YPP, you had AAC. The story about the local government elections in Bauchi is the same across the entire country. That's most of these elections, don't meet the integrity test because the state independent electoral commissions are very weak. Their financial autonomy, their operational autonomy is not guaranteed. Geoffrey, the Constitution actually provides that the power of the State Independent Electoral Commission to make rules and its regulation is subject to the approval of the governor. So technically, the State Independent Electoral Commissions are under, the whims and caprices of the governor. But at the national level, you have INEC, and the Constitution guarantees INEC operational independence because it says that INEC shall not be controlled, cannot be subject to control of the president. This is why we need to amend the Constitution to liberate the state independent electoral commissions from the stranglehold of the governors. If you do that, then we might begin to see a reversal in some of this electoral coronation that we see across the states.
Absolutely. We will continue the conversation on this chokehold you talk about and piggyback on that to other conversation of elections that are coming up. But we'll take this quick break, Samson. We'll come back to continue it. Join us again. Welcome back. We're talking about election management. And Samson Itodo, Executive Director of YAGA Africa, is my guest on the program. And Samson, just a few weeks ago, we heard the former caretaker chairman of the APC in Rivers State, Mr. Tony Okocha, admitting on live television how they committed electoral fraud. In his words, we can play it back at any time. I'm sure you saw that video where he said when he was chief of staff, they write results and they hand it over to the electoral umpire to announce this result at the local government election. And then they are still in charge of tribunal, they incentivize, if you will. And it was just literally admitting to electoral fraud on live television. But of course, nothing has happened till then. Nobody has called anybody to question. So how will this give confidence to people to even go out and vote when they predict that, come on, we already know what the outcome will look like, and how do we go forward besides legislation?
Absolutely. People don't trust electoral outcomes anymore. And when people clamor for INEC to conduct local government elections, I just ask them to look at the Bayelsa, the Kogi, and the Imo governorship elections. And you see clear cases of malpractices. In the last election, YAGA Africa, using our PVT, we did expose some of this fraud, and malpractice in those states. And when you have these cases, it begs to question our commitment to the democratic process because politicians just want power at all costs, and they are willing to do anything and everything to get into power. So you can have the best of legislations. If our political parties and our political actors don't change their attitude towards politics, we will continue to experience, this level of impunity at all levels. And so citizens need to learn to punish political parties and candidates who seek to secure political power at all costs by not voting them into office. There are political parties in Nigeria that are known, for electoral malpractice. But why do we keep rewarding them with our votes? Or why do we keep silent when electoral malpractices actually happen right before us? So we can have the best of legislations. And as you know, I believe strongly that our laws need to change, but our courts also need to dispense justice. If our courts cannot, control the character of our political class through judgments, if you have situation where the judgment that comes from our courts are such, that project the judiciary as a threat to our democracy and not the bastion of hope for the common man, if our courts cannot send politicians who rig elections, INEC officials and collation officers who rewrite results, if they don't go to jail, you're not going to inspire confidence on the part of people. And this is why you have impunity deeply entrenched in our political system, because the actors know that no consequence will be meted out on them when they commit all these infractions. And this is why people are losing trust. They are losing faith, in this entire democratic process. And it's very sad. And this is where both the National Assembly needs to play a critical role in strengthening our laws. The judiciary also needs to purge itself, and really reflect deeply about some of the challenges of nepotism in the appointments of judges. The independence of the judiciary is one that needs to be protected, because no democracy survives across the world without an independent judiciary that can dispense justice without pandering to the whims and caprices of those in government.
All right, Sansi, as we wind down, what you said is both interesting and scary and worrying all in one fell swoop. So let's project ahead. I know there are so many moving parts to this. You've talked about INEC as the electoral umpire, the judiciary as the last hope of the common man in case there are infractions. You also talk about the security agencies to provide security for people. Now we're heading to the first off-cycle election in 2024 at Edo State. And what we're seeing, it looks like we may have a few things on our hands that we may be worried about. When you look at what is playing out and the rhetoric from all the parties, especially what they consider the top parties, what do you see happening in September?
It does appear that the political actors are not preparing for elections. They are actually preparing for war, because the violent rhetoric in the pre-election period is very disturbing. Now, why is it that we have security agencies, we have institutions that seek to hold people to account, but they are not prevailing on these individuals who are either using cultists or different groups to foment violence in the state, or those who are making incendiary statements and not regulating some of the statements and comments that they made? In our recent report, Yaga Africa, in our pre-election observation report, we've raised the fact that the violence building up to this election needs to be curtailed if you're going to build confidence on the part of people to show up at the election. Because one of the fears that we have is that you're going to record low turnout in the election. The second point is the role that INEC also plays. That INEC at the national and at the state level needs to ensure that they are transparent in the management of the elections, that collation officers, both at the ward, at the local government, and at the state level, must be individuals of impeccable character, and that the results management process needs to be open and transparent so that political parties can deploy their agents to those collation centers. Because if you don't manage this election professional manner, is going to provide a very tense environment that might descend into violence. And that's something that we must regulate.
Mr. Sansi Amos, thank you so much. But this is what we'll do, Mr. Etodo. When all their manifesto is out, I know that I've seen that of the PDP. I haven't laid my hands or eyes on the APC manifesto. I understand the Labour Party will come up with theirs and other parties as well. Maybe we can aggregate and begin to force the conversation to stay on the issues, because what we're seeing is totally not welcoming at all. I must thank you so much, Samson Etodo, Executive Director, Yaga Africa. Thank you for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me.
Let's tell you other stories that are developing across the country. The intra-party dispute in the opposition People's Democratic Party in Benue State is rising from its ward congresses on July the 27th, has now snowballed into a full-blown issue, as some members loyal to former Governor Gabriel Soswan have called for cancellation of both the ward and the local government congresses. The group, led by a former Speaker pro tempore at the House of Representatives, Mr. Tengu Segba, called on the National Working Committee of the PDP to ignore any results forwarded from Benue for last weekend local government congresses, alleging that no congress was held on Saturday. They're asking for fresh processes for the conduct of the ward and local government congresses, which outcomes led to those loyal to former Governor Samuel Ortom to suspend then Chairman Mr. John Ngbede, the party secretary and his organizing secretary, on the one hand, while those loyal to Mr. Soswan suspended Mr. Ortom. Then the suspended deputy chairman, zonal chairman of the Benue State Northeast, and the state publicity secretary.
We drew the attention of the National Working Committee of the party through a report by the outgone State Working Committee led by Sajo Angbede. Even more disturbing is the fact that the National Working Committee of our party did not bother to look into issues, but instead went ahead to schedule local government congresses and even sent an electoral panel to come and conduct the congresses using the manufactured fake executive results that were supplied from Abuja. Let it therefore be known to the National Working Committee, the National Executive Committee, and the Board of Trustees, and indeed the whole wide world, that local government congresses of the PDP therefore did not hold anywhere in Benue State. And so no one should cook any result for the state congresses in Benue and present anywhere. We also call on the National Working Committee of our great party to first of all discard the manufactured World Congress result they are holding on to. Collect and use the authentic results which are still lying at the Benue State PDP Secretariat here in Makodi before thinking of moving on to local government congresses.
And just for let's also let you know that the Supreme Court has reserved judgment in the appeal filed by Timipre Silva, that's the governorship candidate of the APC in Bayelsa State, against Doye Diri, the governor of the state. So two cases reserved for judgment by the Supreme Court, Bayelsa and Kogi. We'll find out what those dates are and we'll let you know. But thank you for your time and company. I'm Jeff Ruzama. You've been served on Lunchtime Politics.